Elena sat alone in the living room, the dim glow of a single lamp casting shadows across the walls, her fingers wrapped around a cold cup of tea that had long lost its warmth. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional patter of rain against the window, each drop echoing like a reminder of how empty it felt without Mark, her husband, who had been away on a business trip that seemed to stretch endlessly. She had tried to fill her days with small chores, reading, and television, but the nights were always the hardest, stretching out long and heavy with the weight of solitude. The familiar creak of the floorboards upstairs made her heart tighten, and she found herself glancing at the clock again, willing the hours to pass faster. Memories of Mark's laughter, his soft voice, the way he would pull her close after a long day, played in her mind like old, bittersweet songs, making the quiet of the house feel even more pronounced. She wrapped a blanket tighter around her shoulders and tried to focus on a book, but the words blurred as her mind wandered. Then, just as the clock struck midnight, a sound interrupted the stillness, a gentle, hesitant knock on the front door that made her start and clutch the cup tighter. Who could it be at this hour? Her heart raced as she approached the door, the rain outside making the porch slippery and the night seem colder than it was. When she opened it, she found Daniel, Mark's closest friend, standing there, soaked through from the rain, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes looking tired yet intense, carrying a weight that seemed almost physical. He looked at her and gave a small, awkward smile, saying simply that he needed a place to stay for the night, that he hadn't expected to end up here but didn't have anywhere else to go. Elena hesitated for a moment, the practical side of her wondering if this was the right thing to do, but her compassion won over, and she stepped aside, letting him in, handing him a towel, watching as he tried to shake off the water, his shoulders hunched as if the rain had washed away more than just the droplets on his coat. The air between them was charged in a quiet, unspoken way, a strange mixture of relief, awkwardness, and something neither of them could name yet, as if the night itself had conspired to bring them together for reasons they could not yet understand. Elena led him to the living room, offered him a chair and a warm cup of tea, and watched as he sank into the cushions with a weary sigh, the tension in his body slowly easing but the sadness in his eyes remaining. She asked gentle questions, careful not to pry too much, and he answered with short, thoughtful words, revealing glimpses of a man burdened by worries, responsibilities, and perhaps regrets he could not voice. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming a steady rhythm against the roof and windows, and inside, a strange intimacy settled in, the kind that only forms when strangers, or friends who are almost strangers, share the quiet weight of a long night together. Elena found herself watching him more than she intended, noticing the small details, the way his eyes softened when he spoke of Mark, the subtle tension in his hands, the way he seemed almost surprised by her kindness. She felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest, a mix of concern and curiosity, a reminder that human connections could appear unexpectedly in the most ordinary moments. Daniel, for his part, was aware of her presence in a way that made him both comfortable and uneasy, as if being in the same room allowed him a reprieve from burdens he could not share with anyone else. They moved carefully around each other, speaking softly, exchanging small smiles, the quiet conversation stretching and folding in on itself, moments of laughter mingling with pauses filled with thought. The night deepened, and with it, the feeling that something unspoken was hovering between them, a fragile tension neither dared to name but both could sense, like electricity in the air. Before a storm. Time seemed suspended as they navigated the small space of the living room, each aware of the other's presence in a way that was unusual yet oddly comforting, the kind of awareness that makes a room feel alive even in the dead of night. Elena poured another cup of tea, and they shared it without words, the steam curling between them like a bridge connecting their separate worlds, each sip carrying the weight of unspoken thoughts and emotions. Outside, the rain slowed but did not stop, a gentle reminder that the night was still young and full of possibilities, and though neither of them could predict what would happen, both felt the quiet thrill of change brushing against their lives. Elena's heart beat a little faster as she realized how unusual this night was, how the ordinary act of opening a door had brought a new, unpredictable energy into her home, one that she could not ignore even if she wanted to. Daniel glanced around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings of a friend's home, yet seeing them with new eyes, noticing the small details, the warmth, the careful order, and the subtle grace of the woman who had invited him in. It was a night that seemed simple on the surface but carried beneath it layers of emotion, longing, and human vulnerability, the kind that stories are made of, the kind that linger in memory long after the moment has passed. And as the hours stretched, Elena and Daniel remained in the quiet glow of the lamp, sipping tea, listening to the rain, aware of the night's fragile intimacy, each silently acknowledging that this encounter, brief and unexpected, would leave a mark on them both, one that neither time nor distance could easily erase. The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what might come next, as if the universe itself was pausing to witness the subtle, unspoken connection forming between them, a bond that was at once innocent and charged, ordinary yet extraordinary, simple yet profound, carrying the weight of emotion that words alone could not convey, a story unfolding in real time, gentle, delicate, and unforgettable. In the quiet house on a rainy night, the next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains. Soft and warm, but it did little to lighten the weight that had settled over the living room, where Elena and Daniel sat across from each other, each silently navigating the strange intimacy that had begun the night before. Daniel had slept on the couch, but his rest had been restless, as though the presence of another person, someone he cared for but could not fully express his feelings to, kept his mind in a constant whirl of thoughts and emotions. Elena moved around the kitchen, making breakfast, the sounds of utensils clinking and the kettle boiling filling the silence with a gentle rhythm, yet neither of them spoke much at first, each caught in their own thoughts, aware of how unusual this situation was but powerless to ignore the feelings it stirred. She handed him a plate, and when their hands brushed briefly, a spark passed between them, subtle yet undeniable, making them both aware of the delicate tension that lingered in the room. They began to talk, slowly at first, about trivial matters, weather, news, Mark's long work trip, yet even these small conversations carried a weight, a depth that surprised them both, as if the ordinary words had the power to reveal the hidden corners of their hearts. Daniel opened up about the stress he had been under lately, how life seemed to pull him in different directions, leaving him tired, frustrated, and unsure of his place in the world, and Elena listened with a careful empathy, nodding, asking questions, and responding in ways that made him feel understood, valued, and less alone. In turn, Elena spoke about the emptiness she had felt during Mark's absence, the quiet ache of missing someone she loved deeply, and the loneliness that crept into the edges of her days, making even small tasks feel heavier than they should. Their conversation ebbed and flowed, filled with pauses that were as meaningful as the words themselves, moments where they simply looked at each other, catching glimpses of the unspoken emotions swirling between them, admiration, longing, empathy, and an awareness of a connection that neither had anticipated. As the morning turned into afternoon, they moved from small talk to deeper topics, sharing dreams they had long hidden, the hopes they still held, and the fears that lingered in the back of their minds. Daniel admitted he sometimes felt like he was wandering through life without a clear purpose, that he envied those who seemed to know their path, and Elena found herself opening up about her own insecurities, her doubts about the future, and the subtle ways life had tested her patience and resilience. Each revelation brought them closer, yet they remained careful, aware of boundaries and respect, understanding that their connection, though powerful, existed in the quiet space between friendship, admiration, and an unspoken attraction that neither could fully define. The sun climbed higher, and with it came laughter, a soft, genuine, unforced laughter that surprised them both, breaking through the tension and filling the room with a warmth that was almost tangible. Daniel noticed the little things about Elena, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when thinking, the softness in her voice when she spoke of something she loved, the kindness in her eyes even when discussing difficult topics. And he realized that he had always seen her in one way, but now he was seeing her more fully, more human, more vibrant, and it stirred feelings in him he could not ignore. Elena, for her part, was equally aware of Daniel's presence, of the way he listened, of the quiet strength he carried beneath his exterior, the way he smiled when she said something witty or thoughtful, and she felt herself drawn to him in a way that both thrilled and frightened her. They shared a meal, but it was more than nourishment. It was a continuation of the silent dialogue, the unspoken understanding that had grown overnight, a way to express care and presence without words. After breakfast, they moved to the living room again, sitting with tea in hand, the conversation turning to memories, stories from childhood, funny mishaps, and experiences that shaped who they were. Each anecdote brought smiles, chuckles, and occasionally a moment of wistfulness, the kind that reminded them both of life's fleeting nature and the importance of connection. Daniel shared a moment of vulnerability about feeling isolated despite being surrounded by people, and Elena responded with stories of her own challenges, the times she had felt invisible or misunderstood, and the moments when a kind gesture had changed her perspective entirely. As the hours passed, the lines between friendship, comfort, and something more began to blur subtly, though they both remained conscious of boundaries, of loyalty, and of the unspoken code of respect for Mark. Yet, in the quiet moments, when their eyes met over a shared laugh, when a hand lingered slightly too long near the other's, when a glance carried meaning beyond the surface, they both felt the undeniable pull of human connection, the fragile tension between desire, admiration, and the need for understanding. The room seemed to shrink around them, the ordinary walls and furniture fading as the intensity of their conversation and shared presence took center stage, making the space feel intimate, charged, and alive. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and glistening, yet inside, the emotional storm continued, subtle but persistent, building in quiet waves that neither could fully articulate. Daniel admitted he had been carrying regrets and what-ifs, moments in life where he wished he had spoken up or acted differently, and Elena found herself empathizing, offering gentle encouragement, validation, and the comfort of someone truly listening without judgment. In response, Elena spoke about moments she wished she could undo, choices she had questioned, and paths she had taken out of necessity rather than desire, and Daniel listened, nodding with understanding, sharing his perspective, and offering support in ways that felt unexpectedly tender and protective. As afternoon melted into evening, neither wanted to break the spell of the day, to step back into the world that demanded pragmatism, responsibility, and routine. The house, once silent and empty, now hummed with life, warmth, and a quiet emotional intimacy that neither could ignore. They moved naturally between sitting and pacing, talking and listening, sharing small gestures of care, offering water, adjusting the blanket, handing over a book or a note they had found, and each gesture, though simple, felt profound, loaded with meaning, attention, and unspoken affection. Daniel found himself admiring Elena not just for her beauty but for her resilience, her empathy, and her ability to create space for someone else in her world without hesitation. Elena, in turn, felt a stirring in her heart for Daniel, a recognition of his vulnerability, his strength, and the kind of understanding that felt rare and precious in a world often too loud or too distracted to notice. They shared moments of quiet reflection, watching the sun lower toward the horizon, the light changing in the room, bathing everything in a warm, golden glow, a visual reminder of the transient, precious nature of moments like these. Daniel admitted that being here, in this simple, ordinary living room, talking and connecting, was unlike anything he had experienced in months, perhaps years, and Elena acknowledged that the feeling was mutual, that sometimes the deepest connections arise in the most unexpected circumstances, when two people allow themselves to truly see one another without pretense or distraction. Time seemed suspended, each minute stretching into eternity, each glance and gesture laden with significance, and yet neither spoke of the emotional charge between them directly, respecting boundaries while allowing the connection to grow naturally, like a delicate plant in sunlight. As evening approached, shadows lengthening across the floor, the conversation turned to dreams for the future, small hopes, and the subtle, quiet longing each felt for something meaningful, something that transcended routine, obligations, and the mundane aspects of life. They spoke in soft tones, laughter and sighs punctuating the air, the kind of gentle dialogue that can only happen when two people feel safe, seen, and genuinely understood. Daniel noticed the way Elena's face lit up when speaking of something she loved, the way her eyes softened when expressing compassion, and the way her voice carried warmth, melody, and sincerity that left a lasting impression on him. Elena, meanwhile, observed the subtle gestures of Daniel, his attention to her words, the way he leaned slightly forward when interested, the quiet strength behind his vulnerability, and felt a stirring of admiration and gentle affection, a recognition of his humanity, kindness, and depth. Hours passed without either noticing, the room charged with a quiet intensity that was both emotional and almost romantic, the kind that doesn't need words but is felt in glances, smiles, and the shared rhythm of presence. Even as dinner approached, they lingered, neither wanting to break the delicate, almost sacred intimacy that had grown between them. Daniel's departure from the couch to the window, where he paused to watch the fading light outside, carried a weight, a subtle reminder that the night had shifted something inside both of them, something unspoken yet undeniable. Elena poured herself another cup of tea, feeling the warmth spread through her, and realized how much this unexpected visit, the night spent talking, the shared laughter, the vulnerability, had changed her perspective, reminding her of the depth of human connection, of the power of empathy, and of the surprising ways hearts can touch without crossing boundaries. As the sun finally disappeared, leaving the sky painted with twilight hues, they both sensed that life had altered subtly, irrevocably, that this day, born of a late-night visit, had brought them closer in spirit than they had expected, that the quiet understanding and shared emotional space would linger, leaving marks on their hearts that neither distance nor time could erase. And in that quiet living room, filled with the scent of tea, the warmth of conversation, and the subtle electricity of unspoken attraction, Elena and Daniel sat together, aware of the fragile, powerful connection that had formed, a bond woven through words, presence, and shared vulnerability, one that would shape the days to come and linger in memory long after the sun had fully set, a testament to the extraordinary intimacy that ordinary moments can unexpectedly carry. Morning arrived with a soft, golden light filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the living room where Elena and Daniel now sat, a quiet awareness lingering between them from the night and morning that had passed, the kind of awareness that felt like a gentle weight pressing at the edges of the heart, making ordinary moments feel heavier, more meaningful, more charged with unspoken emotion. Elena moved about the kitchen with a calm purpose, preparing breakfast with motions that were practiced and familiar, but her mind was anything but ordinary. Every glance at Daniel, every small interaction, carried an undercurrent she couldn't ignore, a pull toward him that both thrilled and unnerved her. Daniel watched her quietly, noticing the subtle grace in her movements, the way sunlight caught the strands of her hair, the way her eyes softened when she hummed to herself or smiled at a memory she seemed to recall in that moment, and he felt a mixture of admiration, longing, and a kind of protective instinct he couldn't fully explain. They spoke casually at first, exchanging comments about the weather, the quiet street outside, and Mark's likely progress on his business trip, but even the simplest words held weight now, each sentence a thread weaving the two of them closer together in a tapestry of quiet intimacy. Daniel found himself sharing small, personal details, stories he hadn't told anyone else, confessions that surprised even him in their ease of delivery, and Elena responded with warmth, empathy, and subtle encouragement, offering insights and gentle humor that made him feel lighter, more understood, and remarkably seen. They laughed together at little stories, moments from the past that were both funny and bittersweet, the sound of laughter bouncing softly around the room and filling it with warmth, a reminder that connection and joy could exist even in unexpected circumstances. As they ate, their conversation shifted to memories of family, childhood dreams, and moments that had shaped them, revealing layers of personality, emotion, and vulnerability that neither had anticipated sharing, nor had expected to receive in return. Daniel admitted he often felt like he was wandering through life without a clear path, unsure if his choices were right, unsure of where he belonged, and Elena responded not with judgment but with gentle understanding, sharing her own moments of doubt and uncertainty, of times she had felt lost yet somehow persevered, of choices she had questioned yet accepted as part of her journey. The room was alive with the rhythm of dialogue, punctuated by soft pauses that were just as meaningful as words, moments where they simply looked at each other, exchanging unspoken sentiments, admiration, and a subtle awareness of attraction neither dared to name aloud. Time seemed to stretch as they explored these intimate layers of each other's personalities, Daniel noticing how Elena's laughter could lighten even the heaviest thoughts, how her eyes reflected empathy and intelligence, how she carried both strength and gentleness in a way that made him feel both drawn and humbled, and Elena observing how Daniel's presence seemed steady yet vulnerable, how his expressions betrayed both thoughtfulness and a quiet longing, and how the attention he gave her words made her feel seen in a way that was rare and profoundly moving. They spoke of dreams, hopes, and unspoken fears, revealing ambitions they had tucked away, passions they hadn't pursued, and regrets that lingered like shadows at the edges of their consciousness, yet neither conversation felt intrusive. Instead, it created a rare sense of mutual understanding and safety, a quiet sanctuary within the walls of the home that seemed to exist outside the rules of time and expectation. Daniel found himself admiring Elena not just for her appearance but for her mind, her heart, her courage to feel deeply despite the absence of her husband at that moment, and Elena, in turn, found herself drawn to Daniel's intelligence, humor, and the rare sensitivity he displayed, the kind that made ordinary conversation feel profound and charged with meaning. They shared moments of silence too, comfortable and reflective, the kind of silence that carries understanding, the kind that allows two people to be fully present with one another without words, where glances, gestures, and even breaths communicate as much as language ever could. Elena noticed how Daniel's hand lingered near hers when passing a cup of coffee, how his eyes occasionally held her gaze a fraction too long, and though she didn't move closer, she felt the warmth of connection, the subtle electricity that made her heart beat faster and thoughts wander to places she hadn't expected. Daniel, acutely aware of the feelings stirring inside him, fought to remain respectful, conscious of boundaries, of loyalty to Mark, and of the quiet line that should not be crossed, yet he could not deny the attraction, the emotional closeness, and the pull toward someone who had welcomed him into her life and home without hesitation or question. The conversation turned to moments of fear, uncertainty, and resilience, Daniel sharing experiences of moments he felt inadequate, invisible, or unsure of his place in the world, while Elena offered stories of times she had faced disappointment, heartbreak, and challenges that tested her strength, each exchange building trust and connection, layering the room with empathy and understanding that neither had expected but both silently cherished. Laughter returned intermittently, bright and genuine, breaking the intensity just enough to allow breathing space, reminding them both that even in emotional intimacy, lightness and joy were possible, that connection need not always be heavy, that the simplest shared moments could carry profound meaning. Daniel found himself drawn into Elena's stories, imagining the life she had led, the challenges she had faced, and the quiet victories she had achieved, while Elena felt a rare comfort in Daniel's presence, noticing how naturally he responded, how deeply he listened, and how unspoken gestures, a small nod or a thoughtful look, conveyed a level of care she had rarely experienced outside of her marriage. As the day wore on, the subtle tension between admiration, emotional closeness, and an unacknowledged attraction persisted, neither ignoring it but neither acting on it, aware that boundaries existed, yet also aware that human hearts often wandered where reason feared to tread, that feelings could be awakened simply by presence, conversation, and shared understanding. They moved about the room with ease, passing items, adjusting blankets, making small gestures of care, handing him a napkin, refilling his cup, offering a plate of snacks, and each act, though ordinary, carried weight, building a quiet intimacy, an emotional scaffolding that made the house feel alive, warm, and safe, a cocoon where vulnerability could exist without judgment. Daniel admitted moments of loneliness, of longing for connection he had seldom found, and Elena shared feelings of missing companionship, of craving understanding beyond the surface pleasantries of daily life, and together they recognized the rare and delicate bond forming, one that combined empathy, respect, admiration, and a quiet spark of desire that neither wanted to name but both felt deeply. Outside, the day brightened, yet inside, the emotional storm continued in subtle, persistent waves, the kind that makes ordinary rooms feel charged, makes moments feel electric, and leaves both participants aware that their lives had intersected in a way that could not easily be undone. Conversation turned to small joys, fleeting memories, and aspirations for a future they couldn't fully define, yet the act of speaking, of listening, of witnessing one another's inner world, created a space of profound emotional connection. Laughter, sighs, and quiet reflection punctuated the hours, moments that carried more meaning than either expected, layering warmth, respect, and a subtle romantic tension across the room. Daniel noticed Elena's small gestures of care, how she poured his tea with attention, how she moved around the room gracefully, how she offered thoughtful commentary on his stories, and each moment made him feel more alive, more attentive, more deeply affected by her presence. Elena, observing Daniel's attentiveness, intelligence, and quiet sensitivity, felt a stirring in her heart, a gentle flutter that reminded her of the complexity of human emotion, of the way hearts could respond to kindness, empathy, and shared vulnerability. As the afternoon slipped toward evening, the two remained immersed in conversation, their connection deepening, marked by mutual respect, gentle attraction, and an emotional intimacy that felt rare and valuable, a connection that neither planned for but both silently acknowledged as significant. The day passed in this quiet, emotionally charged rhythm, leaving both Elena and Daniel aware that something between them had shifted, something that went beyond ordinary friendship, beyond casual conversation, yet remained contained, subtle, and respectful, a delicate balance between admiration, emotional connection, and the quiet recognition of feelings neither dared fully name. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the room in soft shades of amber and gold, they both felt the quiet resonance of the day, the laughter, the confessions, the shared vulnerability, the unspoken acknowledgement of attraction, and the comfort of being seen and understood, and knew that the late-night visit that had begun as a simple favor had evolved into something far more significant, something that would linger in their hearts, shape their thoughts, and leave a lasting imprint on their lives. A gentle, profound reminder of the quiet power of connection, empathy, and the subtle intimacy that can arise when two hearts meet under unexpected circumstances. Even after Daniel had left, Elena felt the subtle weight of his presence lingering in the house, a quiet reminder of the emotional intimacy that had built between them over the last 24 hours, and she moved about her home with a strange mix of restlessness and reflection, the walls echoing with the memory of his laughter, the soft sound of his voice, and the gentle way he had listened to her, making her feel truly seen in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. She went about her morning chores, folding laundry, tidying up the living room, and arranging small vases of flowers by the windows, but her mind constantly drifted back to the night and morning she had shared with Daniel, thinking about the way he had carried himself, the quiet vulnerability in his expressions, and the rare blend of strength and sensitivity that made him so compelling. Each memory carried a quiet ache, a longing for the connection that had blossomed between them, and she found herself reflecting on her own feelings, her loyalty to Mark, the deep love she held for her husband, and yet the undeniable awareness that human hearts sometimes wander, even in the midst of devotion, toward unexpected warmth, understanding, and shared vulnerability. As the hours passed, Elena thought of the moments when Daniel had leaned forward, when his eyes had lingered on hers, when he had shared stories of fear, loss, and hope, and she realized that even the simplest interactions, handing him a cup of tea, laughing at a shared memory, offering a comforting word, had created a space between them that felt intimate, powerful, and unforgettable. She remembered how they had spoken of dreams and regrets, how each confession had been met with empathy, how they had laughed and sighed together, and how the quiet pauses, the gentle glances, and the unspoken understanding had built a connection that was rare and delicate, a connection she could not easily set aside even when the reality of her marriage and daily life returned. That evening, when Mark finally returned from his trip, Elena felt a complex rush of emotions as she greeted him at the door, hugging him tightly, smiling, and listening to his cheerful recounting of work, trips, and encounters, all the while feeling the lingering awareness of Daniel's presence in her thoughts, a subtle tension that she held quietly, without letting it affect her actions or words, maintaining the boundaries she knew were necessary yet feeling the quiet thrill and ache of emotional awakening. Mark's presence, warm and familiar, reminded her of the life they shared, the love they had built together, the promises and routines that formed the foundation of their marriage, yet Elena could not deny the way her heart had stirred with Daniel, how deeply she had felt seen and understood, and how those emotions lingered like a shadow at the edges of her consciousness, gentle yet insistent, reminding her that human connection often arrives in unexpected ways. She prepared dinner, laughed at Mark's stories, and shared small moments of tenderness, yet beneath the surface, there was a quiet reflection, a recognition of the emotional journey she had experienced, the delicate balance of desire, loyalty, and understanding, and the realization that moments of connection with others could exist without threatening what was sacred in her life, that feelings did not always need to be acted upon to be meaningful. In the following days, Elena found herself thinking about Daniel frequently, wondering how he had returned to his own life, whether he carried the same memories of intimacy, laughter, and conversation that she did, and how those shared moments had left an imprint on them both, shaping thoughts, emotions, and awareness in ways subtle yet profound. She reflected on how one late-night visit, a simple act of hospitality, had opened doors to emotions she had not expected to experience, revealing the fragile beauty of human connection, the quiet power of listening and understanding, and the way hearts can respond to kindness and empathy without crossing lines, creating an emotional resonance that lingers far longer than any physical presence. Elena considered the ways her life had shifted, how she noticed small details she had previously overlooked, like the comfort of silence, the value of shared understanding, the thrill of laughter exchanged over simple stories, the warmth of someone truly listening, and she realized that Daniel's visit had acted as a mirror, reflecting her own emotional depth, resilience, and longing for connection in ways that were both exhilarating and grounding. She also thought about Daniel himself, imagining him returning home, feeling lighter perhaps, carrying memories of their shared moments, laughing at something they had said, reflecting on the sincerity of their conversations, and she recognized that even without words, actions, or declarations, they had left a mark on each other's lives, a subtle shift in perception and awareness that would influence the days and decisions to come. Elena continued her daily routine, attending to work, home, and Mark with care and attention, yet her mind often wandered, revisiting conversations, smiles, shared laughter, and moments of quiet vulnerability, feeling the gentle ache of emotions that were real but could not be expressed openly, a bittersweet reminder of the depth and unpredictability of human hearts. She understood, in a way she hadn't before, that connection could be profound without being physical, that intimacy could exist in empathy, attention, and shared understanding, and that one person could touch another's life deeply simply by being present, listening, and responding with kindness and authenticity. Days turned into a week, and while Mark remained unaware of the subtle emotional shift that had occurred in Elena, she carried within herself a quiet awareness of life's fragility, the importance of noticing small moments, and the way human hearts often intersect in ways that surprise, delight, and sometimes unsettle, leaving traces that linger like gentle echoes long after the moment has passed. Daniel's visit, brief as it was, became a touchstone for reflection, a benchmark against which Elena measured her own emotional depth, her capacity for empathy, and her understanding of love, longing, and human complexity, and she found herself both grateful for the experience and keenly aware of the boundaries that had to be maintained, balancing emotional truth with loyalty, desire with reason, and admiration with respect. In quiet evenings, she would sit by the window, recalling Daniel's smile, his thoughtful words, the warmth of shared tea, the subtle gestures that had communicated more than words could, and she felt a gentle stirring in her heart, a mix of longing, gratitude, and awareness that life was richer when human connections were allowed to exist fully, even if they were temporary, subtle, or unspoken. She realized that emotional experiences like this could transform ordinary life, create depth in routine, and illuminate the heart's capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and connection, reminding her that the human experience is never as simple as it appears, that one encounter can ripple through days and weeks, altering perception, shaping choices, and leaving a lasting imprint that is at once quiet, profound, and life-affirming. Even as she reconnected fully with Mark, hugging him, listening to him, and engaging with his world, Elena carried within herself the memory of Daniel, the subtle intensity of their shared moments, and the emotional resonance that had quietly, gently changed her, leaving her both reflective and grateful for the unexpected ways life allows hearts to meet. And in the quiet of her home, at night, as she prepared for sleep, Elena understood that this late-night visit, this shared day of conversation, laughter, and vulnerability, had opened her heart in ways both delicate and transformative, reminding her that connection is not measured only by action or declaration but by understanding, presence, and the quiet power of human empathy, and she drifted into rest with the knowledge that some experiences, fleeting as they may be, leave marks that endure, shaping hearts, memories, and lives long after the moment has passed.